What's up, everybody? This is Ripples in Wales, back for another video. Third one today. I hope you're all doing well and having a great day, wherever you are now in the world, whatever you're doing. Cool. Let's just do a quick recap video on this BRICS nations business. Because the more I research on it, the more refined I can present it to you all, and the more stuff we can clear up. Now, there's a lot of contention in the community. I've seen the past few days where people are thinking that the BRICS nations token is going to be using XRP or the XRPL, and that's not the case. We're not going down that road. There's nothing to suggest that's going to be the case. But what we can do is pull some facts off the page and see how the new BRICS nations economy is challenging West for superiority, both in terms of their growing economies, both in their populace, both in the landmass, both in trade, everything. And they've overtaken the G7 countries already, and the BRICS nations now constitute over 50% of the global population and 50% of the global GDP. There's a shift occurred, okay? And so the West has to react to this, and that's what we're going to focus on. This challenging. I'm going to build my case, just a really quick recap case on the basis of this, and this is where I see things going. We've been told by numerous insiders that the BRICS nations would be a rising star in the situation. We don't know. We have no conclusive evidence at all to point that XRP is going to be involved in BRICS. But what we do know, and this is what we do know, and it's good to keep things clean, and I love speculation and all the rest of it, but let's just look over the facts for a second. What we do know is the BRICS were heavily involved in Ross van der Meer, Marvin Gaye's points, okay, and how they would, you would see a changing of order, okay. This was the very early image that he released, okay, to show that there was a change in paradigm occurring from the old banking cartels of the Rothschilds over to a new elite, okay, and a new system, okay. Let's use that word, a new system. We also know in his later renditions of that same image that the BRICS nations formed, and they had some sort of gold-backed systems in there, and we saw the rise of China and Russia. Now, this is the part that you want to be focused on. There is so much BS floating around, and it's important that we bring things back onto the right rails here. Okay, this image depicts the rise of China and Russia, okay, which are the BRICS nations, and the fall of the US. Okay, and so there's a change in order, and we can see that in actual demographic images. Okay, look at this for a second. I'm going to play this. Okay, doesn't have any image. Right, let's go. Right. This is BRICS versus the G7. It's an infographic by GDP. Purchasing power parity percentage of the world. And it runs from 1992 up to a projected 2028. But there is a crossing, a flipping that occurs. It was released by the IMF, so we know it's credible. And it was released in 2023. Now, we can see in 2020... Watch now, as the BRICS nations, which constitute China, India, Russia, Brazil and South Africa, overtake 2020 the G7. And we're seeing a drift. So the forecast line is from there onwards. So in 2027-28, there's going to be a big divide. Okay, and the West has to react to this. So we can pause that there, and we can see now that the G7 are really in a bit of a weaker position. And what does a weaker position mean? Well, it means trade. It means their population is shrinking, their demographics are shrinking. Okay, and so they become a less of a strong entity. Why have they been such a strong entity before world developing economies? In the United Kingdom, in the Americas, and other European sectors, our economies have been developing, but we're not developing countries anymore. We're developed countries, and the countries on the lower rungs, or the less developed, better word to put it. Apologise. The less developed countries are now booming. Okay, and that means that a lot of trade is been going over there, and they will expand very quickly. Which means as they expand, there's a lot of opportunity in those countries through investments. Now, the West has formally used institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, the ECB as tools for loans and payments in the dollar. Our payment system has been controlled by SWIFT, as we know, and that has formed the basis of the world payment plumbing network up to date, using the US dollar as the liquidity protocol tool. We know that petrol has been the former tool of liquidity in the equation for the US dollar, you know, the trading in the largest commodity in the world, oil, and that now has turned a page, or turned a corner, and we're beginning to see other countries take a stab at pricing their oil, such as Saudi Arabia, in other currencies. So the demand for the dollar as a global tool of liquidity, as the reserve currency, is diminishing. And this will occur over a longer time duration, hence why nothing is done overnight. There's no like immediate occurrence to this. This is a slow, gradual bleeding out of a death of a currency. And it's happened many times before, and we can study it. Please study Ray Dalio's books, The Changing Order. So what's the interest of this? Well, we know we can bring this image up here, and I covered a snapshot of this in my previous video yesterday, and it was a video leaked out by Marvin Gaye or Ross Vandermeer back in the day, and it denominates the centerpiece of the picture by a logo with AIIB, and it looks like A to B. And you must understand what this center logo means before you can understand any of this picture, okay? But what I'll say is that what it's referring to is BRICS. Okay, AIIB is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and it is like the IMF or the World Bank for the BRICS nations. It is also, there's another bank I've mentioned before called the New Development Bank, which offer loans to all the BRICS nations and developing countries in order to support and bootstrap their developing needs. Formerly, BRICS nations would have had to go to the IMF and the World Bank and go cap in hand and asking for a loan in dollars or in their currency, and the IMF quite carefully decided how to control them with loans and whatnot. Now they've broken the shackles off, and now they can do their own loans to their own countries with the Chinese-led Asian infrastructure investment banks. So it means they don't need to go and use the dollar before. They don't need to go to the IMF, and they don't need to go to the World Bank. That means they can become self-sufficient. Now, they formerly also used SWIFT as a payment transfer protocol, but because of the bad actors that have controlled SWIFT and create sanctions on countries around the world, they don't really want to use SWIFT anymore. So they created their own function called CIPS, CIPS. Okay, and it mentions CIPS here, AIE to use CIPS. Okay, CIPS is the competitor of SWIFT, as I said, and they will send payments, cross-border settlements around the world in renminbi and other currencies potentially in the future. So again, they don't need to use SWIFT and they don't need to use the dollar. This picture is all about de-dollarization through the rise of the BRICS countries and the nations, through using their own infrastructure to circumvent the West's infrastructure and to make themselves independent. Okay, well, where does the XRP fit into this picture, according to Marvin Gaye? Well, I'm going to hypothesize that the idea is that I've told you many times before, the idea was Ripple to take over SWIFT. We've seen it in this picture here in the famous Bearable Guy Christmas scene. The idea of Ripple's Sangreal was payments. Now, who controls payments on the planet right now? SWIFT. Okay, so if Ripple's Sangreal, which means their holy grail, is to replace SWIFT, then we know that the SWIFT is probably going to likely have a different protocol in the near future. That protocol is likely to be using XRP, or in part using XRP for its liquidity provisions. So why would the West be thinking of a change in system and having more of a neutral, interoperable token of account as the reserve currency, shall we say? Well, it potentially boils down to one large thing that I mentioned before, which is called the BRIC, BRI, which is the Belt and Road Initiative, which is what Ross Vandermeer alluded to in his final video, saying that the China-led Silk Road 2.0, which is called the Belt and Road Initiative, is the connecting pipe that links the Asian BRICS nations countries over to the Western European countries. And it is a investment portal for the BRICS nations to invest in 150 countries globally. And everybody wants to be involved in that trade. Now, what the hell has that got to do with SWIFT and XRP? Well, if SWIFT wants to let's rephrase that. If the West at all want to be relevant in this new changing order, they will have to upgrade their systems and potentially not be reliant on the dollar, because nobody wants to use the dollar anymore. So it means they're going to have to change the unit of account, which is why probably the IMF, the ECB and the World Bank scrambled to Ripple in order to find a public-private partnership. In doing so, what you've got is that the G20, the G7 countries are likely to sit round a table and bring their central banks into the fold now that they've been taken out of the purview of the Rothschild family, and they now will create an open, connected, interoperable framework of institutions that are using a different liquidity protocol underneath, which would likely be XRP if that was the case, that these people are correct, or at least plug into the XRPL and use the software technology. What advantages could this give them? Well, the advantages is that by not using the dollar, they may be able to plug into the Belt and Road Initiative. They may have a greater open doors policy to the BRICS nations. We don't know that the BRICS nations are going to create any form of token yet. You know, there's a likelihood they'll come out and create their own cryptographic blockchain token and peg it to gold, but that isn't retail facing at all. That is for interbank purposes only. It is not for the average Joe on the street. And those tokens will never go onto the open market. That's been stipulated by Jim Rickards in this sense. So for interoperable trade, SWIFT is making itself more appealable. The European and the American and British institutions are making themselves more appealable to the Belt and Road Initiative, to the BRICS nations, because the developing world is now coming to them saying, you know, we're willing to do trade, but we're not going to do it through your SWIFT, through sanctions and through the dollar. So if you want to play ball, we're likely to need a change in protocol. Now, with the blockchain technology, or DLT, we know that the technology is open and distributed, and it's fully auditable. So no more funny business can occur. So by using a pristine collateral or liquidity token on the base, we know that things can settle immediately. There's no kind of who-has. And, you know, this private company, Ripple, are wanting to do business globally. They're not in a position where they want to shut people out, I'd imagine. Who knows what occurs with the distributed XRPL in the future? It will stay decentralized, and the token of XRP will stay very decentralized as it grows and grow in adoption. It will become more decentralized, of course, as a byproduct of that. So this is what we can infer so far. SWIFT is likely to upgrade its systems. The IMF, the World Bank and all the central banks want to upgrade their systems to remain relevant. The dollar system, he says in this picture, is now gone, but fiat is here to stay. The BRICS nations are likely to have a gold-pegged currency, cryptocurrency. It does not mean that it will be on the XRPL. Please do not jump down that rabbit hole. All we can presume is this line leading across to the SWIFT and the change of the dollar is that the Western institutions are likely to need a better protocol of liquidity. Okay, and that would equal the Nostro accounts and SWIFT, which is why I've hammered home this point the whole time in any of these scenes that we look at. The Bearable Guy scenes, it's all about SWIFT. It's all about payments. Payments is a huge thing. CBDCs are far off into the distant future at the minute for me. Anyhow, I hope we can kind of come to the understanding that this is a big change going on, and it's all about the BRICS nations and their growth and superiority on the planet, and that the West is having to update their protocols in order to maybe have an open doors policy to the East. Interesting times, my friends. I hope that kind of gives a good synopsis, breakdown of what the insiders maybe how we're trying to kind of leak across to us back. And it's taken me great time to understand this. And now as the BRICS nations meetings come into the fore and Jim Rickards explains these things, I'm starting to understand it much better. Anyway, I hope that all helps y'all, and it kind of starts to break down the walls and the mystified nature of all this BRICS goings on and how it may be connected to distributed technology. Anyhow, hope you all enjoyed, and be blessed, and see you in the next video.